Okay.
Well, good morning, guys. We very interesting meeting earlier, and we can talk about that later. But I'd like to get Michael on to review the changes that we talked about yesterday in regards to the Ag Innovation Board. And so I guess, Michael, if you want to put those changes up and show us the changes, that would be good.
Okay. Do you want them up on the screen, or do you want to follow them along on your committee webpage? I know sometimes you have preferences for one versus the other.
Yeah, well, we aren't too fussy. Which way, any preference, guys?
I'll just have to turn my camera off because I freeze up if there's a screen share.
Yeah, well, why don't we just check them on our screen?
Okay. Well then, and I assume you just want me to go through the changes, or do you want me to go through the whole?
No, we did a pretty good review yesterday, I thought, and I think the few changes we asked for would be most important, unless somebody's got another question on a different section.
Okay. So I'll just walk through the changes and let me know if you have any other questions.
Yeah.
So the first change is on the first page, lines 19 through 21, adding to the requirements of the board's duties to include the language about they will recommend targets to achieve the state goal of an overall reduction in the use of pesticides. So the language will now read that the board shall recommend practices that reduce the use of and exposure to pesticides and synthetic fertilizers in order to protect soil biology, human health, and environmental health, including recommended targets to achieve the state goal of an overall reduction in the use of pesticides consistent with sound pest or vegetative management practices.
Yeah. That sounds pretty good. And Anthony, you're the one that raised the issue yesterday about talking more about this. Is that satisfactory, do you think?
I think so.
Yeah, it sounds good and looks good. Everybody, I see Brian, Chris, you okay? And Corey? We'll just count Corey as a positive. I don't know where he is, but anyways, go ahead, Michael.
Okay. The next change is on page 3. And this is regard to the language about studying and issuing recommendations regarding the feasibility of use of biodegradable plastics. There was the concern about the use of the term renewable chemicals. And so now it says study and issue recommendations regarding the feasibility of the use of biodegradable plastics in agriculture and the promotion of the use of and production of biodegradable plastics and similar products in Vermont. So it takes out the incentives language that was concerning some of the members yesterday, and it takes out the renewable chemical language, which was, I believe, confusing some people as well.
Yeah. Any question on that change, Chris?
Just about the grammar, Michael. Has this been through editors?
It has.
Okay. The feasibility of using biodegradable plastics, I would have thought, but all right.
Okay. Should I move on?
Yes.
Then on page 4, in the board composition, you wanted the commissioner of health or a designee with expertise in the effects of pesticides on human health.
Yeah, that would be the health person, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And then on page 4, line 6, you wanted the active farmer who is a member of an organization representing the conventional dairy industry in Vermont.
Yeah, Corey isn't here. You want to take that back out, guys?
No, I'm right here. That's good.
That's
He's-
not
I think
Corey's
he said he
voice.
wants to take it out. I
Yeah,
think he said he changed his mind.
I heard him
Boy,
say, I
really
agree, Mr.
groaning.
Chair.
Nope. I'll say the same.
Boy, he got back on the hurry, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, okay, Michael. I think everybody's in agreement with that.
Okay. On page 5, line 5, you wanted to have the provision that the board shall meet no fewer than 4 times a year.
Yes, yeah. And
Okay.
all set, guys?
And then in page 5, line 13, there was what was that change? I have to go back and look at my notes.
Is that in the seed review, Michael? Which-
No, it's in the powers and duties of the board regarding their I don't recall what I did there. Hold on a second. Oh, it had previously said propose an annual budget report that provides ideas for funding sources for any new programs created in the annual report. And
Yeah.
it's not, the report's not creating the programs, they were recommending the
Yeah.
programs. And so that was changed from created to recommended. And then on page 6, line 1, this is the typo that Margaret pointed out regarding the seed review committee language that's been there since it was enacted in 2018, 2019. And it says, in order to ensure the appropriate use of traits of a new genetically engineered seed, it used to say use or traits. And so the agency agreed that it should say of.
Yep.
And
Also, we kind of approved all these yesterday anyway, so.
And that is the final change.
Yeah, are there other comments by any of the committee in regards to our end product here? If, if not, if Corey, are you still on?
Yep, I can take the vote.
Yeah, good. Would somebody care to move the bill, Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will move that we vote out draft 3.2 of H434 favorably.
Well, the motion's been made to vote out 434, draft 3.2. Is there a second? And Chris seconded that. And so you want to call the roll, Corey?
Yep. Senator Callamore,
Yes.
Senator Parent, yes. Senator Pearson,
Yes.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
That's 5-0. I'll get that over to, do you want me to send it to you, Gail, or do you want me to send it to Linda?
Linda, please. She's got all the forms.
Okay, I'll get that over in a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. So the vote was 5-0, and Brian, you'd be the reporter.
Yep.
And so we can get that one going and get it out of the way. So thanks a lot, Michael, for all your help, and thank you, committee, for, I think we have a we made the House bill better. It's our opinion anyways. We'll find out when it gets to the House if we get it done. But anyways, anything else before we switch gears here? Any questions for Michael? Are you going to be with us tomorrow, Michael, at all?
I am with you in the morning on H420 until I think you go on the floor.
Yeah. Oh, you got most, okay, so that's what's on our schedule, and I wanted to make sure we were
Actually, I'm with you until 10:30, and then I do ag tourism and judiciary after that.
so they are taking that up.
They've looked at it once already, and they're going to look at it again tomorrow.
Yeah. Do you have a vote in there, or they just listen to what you say?
I do not have a vote in.
God's sakes. They ought to give you a vote. So we'll be dealing with that tomorrow morning. Are you leaving us now, Michael?
I am, unless you want me to stay.
Well, we're going to be dealing with the animal cruelty bill, H421, but it's basically taking testimony from a group of people that are interested in the bill. And so if you've got work that you'd like to be doing,
Okay.
we can bring you up to speed on the rest of this. And last night, I had a conversation with Allison Eastman, and she was going to call you in regards to about farm labor, or not farm labor housing, I think in regards to farm housing. And they've gotten some complaints from farmers that they run out. I don't know how this happened, but they've run out of room for housing for their farm workers and farm hands on their farm land that's not enrolled in current use and all those things. And I said, well, Michael knows quite a bit about that. Why don't you talk with him, and then we'll pick up on that subject sometime before we deal with miscellaneous ag bill, and see if there's something. We'll have to get Gus in and probably Nick from the land trust. But anyways, she may be calling you, and I just wanted to let you know.
Okay. All right. I'll send her an email to see if she wants to talk.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you,
Okay.
Michael.
Have a good day.
Yeah. So it's 10:58, and we have some witnesses joining us, and I don't know if Bryn's with us or not from the council, but she's the one that drafted H421. And Gail, can you send us a copy of that?
Senator Starr, I will do that.
Yeah, just throw it on the email.
Okay, happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you. So folks, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes. We can probably get started a little bit ahead and at least introduce ourselves and get ready to roll at 11 o'clock. So I believe we're live, and I'm Bobby Starr, and I chair the committee, and I'm from Essex, Orleans County. Chris?
Chris Pearson, Senator from Chittenden County.
Hi, I'm Anthony Polina, Senator from Washington County.
Brian Collmore representing Rutland County.
Corey Parent from Franklin County.
And so if we have two on now, Stacy and Jessica, and I'm expecting a couple of more. So if you ladies would like to introduce yourselves and the organization that you're representing, that would be good.
Stacy, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Starr, members of the committee. My name is Stacy Ober. I am the legislative advocate in New England for the American Kennel Club. And take a minute to share some detail about the American Kennel Club. We are a 135-year-old not-for-profit animal welfare organization, and we are a club of clubs. We represent more than 5,000 clubs across the country, 10 of which are in Vermont. And just by way of the activities, performance events that our club members engage in strengthening the human canine bond, in 2019, AKC licensed or sanctioned 61 events in Vermont, with more than 5,400 dogs participating. So it's a very popular thing to do. We have agility, obedience, confirmation, scent trials, a trick dog, all kinds of events where people are able to enjoy and bond with their dogs. And I'm proud to share that we have funded more than $59 million worth of canine health research benefiting all dogs. So we are a recognized and trusted expert in canine health, breeding, training, and responsible dog ownership. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and glad to have you with us, Stacy. Jessica, I guess, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jess Daniel. I'm the Executive Director of the Addison County Humane Society in Middlebury. I'm also the current chair of the Animal Cruelty Investigations Advisory Board, which is the board set up in 2016 to support the legislature's efforts to improve response to animal cruelty in Vermont. Also like to grab a second to tell Stacy that my organization about 5 or 6 years ago was the recipient of some funds from the AKC. There was a division of your organization that supported our program, which provides free care for people fleeing domestic violence here in Vermont. So just a shout out there. I'm also the current president of the Vermont Humane Federation, which is a statewide organization of animal welfare individuals and organizations, and we work on a number of fronts.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. And we have Mary with us. Hi, Mary, good to see you again, and welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm Mary McFawn, and I am the president of the Vermont Federation of Dog Clubs, which is a club of clubs, and dedicated to responsible dog ownership and the well-being of dogs. And I'm also on the Animal Cruelty Advisory Board. I'm representing the Vermont Federation of Dog Clubs today.
Yeah, and I don't know if Bren's with us yet or not from the council. Oh,
Yeah,
morning.
Good morning, committee. Nice to see you.
So would any one of the three of you folks want to lead off with the testimony in regards to your feelings in regards to H421? Is there any particular order that you would like to present in?
I think Jessica would be good.
Yep. You're muted, Jessica.
Personally, it would make sense for me for Bryn to start as she drafted the legislation, but I'm also happy to start if that's preferable.
Well, if you want us to run through it first, but if you, I think it would probably serve a better purpose if you go through the bill and you know, in the different sections or wherever you have concerns or tell that and then Brad can listen and then we'll you know, we'll have those suggestions recorded and we'll go back and go through the bill and won't have to tie you folks up, you know, any. So if you want to roll through it, that's great.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I do know it fairly well because I worked with the House Ag Committee both in last year's session and a little bit earlier this year to pass the bill as you guys have it before you now. And I am essentially in complete support of this bill as it stands. I think it serves to address two long-standing problems that have existed in the statutes that address who is qualified to investigate animal cruelty. I fully support how it reduces the number of individuals who have this statutory authority. Previously, it was a list of 6 or 7 different categories of people ranging from health officers to humane society, poorly defined humane society representatives to law enforcement. Also, previously, there was not any language in the statute about the required training and accountability that these investigators needed to have. And those two facts would lead often to investigations that were started by people who were untrained, and you know that never led anywhere good, quite frankly. You know, cases that should have been prosecuted were never prosecuted. But very similarly, there were you know, responsible pet owners, people who ran boarding operations, dog kennels, other operations who were falsely sort of accused of wrongdoing because the people doing the investigations weren't trained. They didn't know what to look for, and they didn't know what they were looking at. So I've been a humane investigator in Vermont for almost 20 years now by virtue of my statutory authority as a Humane Society representative. And I've seen this, you know, I've seen this lack of accountability and training play out over and over and over to the detriment not only of animals, but also to the detriment of responsible pet owners and animal caretakers. So I think it's going to solve a lot of problems to narrow that definition down and to hold those more narrowly defined people accountable for what they do. In particular, I like a couple of things about the bill. I like the fact that training has to be, it's not a one-time thing. It's not a one and done. It's something that's going to be required to be refreshed because, as you guys know, as well as anybody, the laws change and people who are out there clarifying and supporting them need to know what they are. Secondly, and I think this is a really important one, this bill ties the person doing the investigations to the organization that is authorizing them to do the investigations. So that I, for example, even with my experience and my training from years ago, if I were to leave my position tomorrow, I would not be able to go out next week and investigate animal cruelty. Right now, there's no link between the sponsoring organization, if you will, and the person doing the work. I think that one's really important. A couple of years ago, there was a bill passed that provided, it was essentially Good Samaritan protection for organizations such as mine that support law enforcement in animal cruelty investigations. And I think that's terrific because it encourages us to step up. But I also, again, like the tying of the investigator to the organization for that reason. We know who's supporting law enforcement. We know that they are, 501c3, good standing, and have accountability through this training. So just to wrap up, I support the bill. I think it's been well thought out. I think that the amendment that you're considering today that clarifies the exemptions for livestock and grazing practices. I think that even though that existed throughout this process, I think that making it clear that there are certain practices, that are exempt from the process of investigation is important, and it seemed to reassure some parties that were concerned about it. So I also support that amendment, adding that sentence in where it is.
Yeah,
That's it, unless there are questions.
Yeah. Are there any questions from the committee in regards to Jesse's testimony? If not, we'll move on to Stacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make clear that AKC does support House 421 as it relates to animal control officer training and authorization. And I want to start by acknowledging and appreciating all the work that's been done by the Animal Cruelty Investigation Advisory Board and the House Ag Committee. I wanted to speak to you all today with regard to one area of the bill that I believe is vague, and to share experience that I've had in New Hampshire as to why I believe it would benefit to perhaps make a small amendment in terms of clarification. In the advisory board's report to the legislature, and as it was reviewed by Legislative Counsel Hare last week in the walkthrough of the bill text, one of the goals of the bill is to fix the current definition of humane officer because it's overbroad and grants overly broad powers. And in the walkthrough, it was noted that the bill only allows a person with training and who's authorized to perform the functions and duties. And that's consistent with the header of section 356 on the top of page 3, if you have the bill in front of you. I just want to walk through some of the text and where I believe it being vague. Under 356 subsection B, you're authorized if you're an employee of a humane society or a municipality. If you go up to section 351.5, the definitions section, the definition of humane society only requires registration as a private nonprofit in good standing with the Vermont Secretary of State. And then, if you will, just look quickly at the definition of humane society officer at section 351, subsection 4B. So the definition requires that, 1, you complete the training, and then little I, you're an individual designated humane society employee, or II, an individual appointed and authorized by the municipality. And so my question is, in reading this, it's the word designated, and I'm unclear whether or not it's the Humane Society that's doing the designating of an individual employee to function in this role, or if a government body is going to be designating or authorizing a Humane Society to perform these duties, who will then select an employee that will go through the training to provide the services. And the reason I'm asking is that if the interpretation is the first, meaning that the language is only about the designation as it relates to an employee, I want to just flag that in essence, what you're saying, or what the interpretation is that it looks like you're relying upon only a private nonprofit's tax classification as qualifying it to select an employee to go through the training and perform these duties. And if you intended no government oversight of which societies would be in a position to designate employees, I want to just pose a few questions for you.
Yeah, Bren, are you with us?
I
Yes.
sure am.
Yeah. Did you hear the question? And-
Yes.
And what is your interpretation of the BI and a little I and two little I's?
Yep. So for the record, Bryn Hare from Legislative Council, the House added that word designated throughout the bill towards the end of their work on the bill. And that was to clarify that it was the Humane Society that was tasked with designating what employee would be subject to the training and other requirements for the humane officer function. So the idea was it wasn't any Humane Society employee that could be a humane officer. It had to be one that was designated by the Humane Society.
So if I could just share with you, Mr. Chairman, some of the questions that I have in reading it as a result of that interpretation. It would include, for instance, what would be the employee's assigned area? Would it be the whole state of Vermont? Is it the Humane Society that's deciding what the area that will be served includes, if there's no government body, connection to the Humane Society? And what if an officer is performing the job poorly, providing misleading information, or conducting themselves in bad faith? And the reason I ask these questions is because it then is for me a question around where would you file a complaint? Would it be with the Humane Society organization itself? The definition of Humane Society looks as though it doesn't require a physical presence in the state of Vermont because it's an animal care agency. And so the reason I ask these questions is because there are, unfortunately, situations that occur as they do in any industry, right? And I can share a couple of experiences in New Hampshire, for instance. An AKC breeder of merit in 2019 was charged with animal cruelty. Their 18 dogs were seized in February. This organization did have a contract with the municipality. There was obviously the toll on their reputation, the legal fees. They were also provided an invoice they had to pay to the nonprofit for the care of the animals while in temporary custody, only to have the charges dropped. And so I appreciate Jessica acknowledging that I'm not familiar with the issues that have played out in Vermont, but I'm just acknowledging that these situations can occur. The second is, before my coming into this position, there was a case in New Hampshire, unfortunate case of animal hoarding, where an out-of-state private nonprofit was contacted. They entered into an agreement with the police department to assist with the seizure of the animals. And unfortunately, the organization decided that they would use the photos taken during the seizure for their fundraising efforts on social media. And the case went up to the New Hampshire Supreme Court around whether or not there was an invasion of privacy here. Should the evidence have been thrown out? The court said no, the evidence shouldn't have been thrown out when they did their analysis of whether or not her constitutional rights were violated. But I share it again in the context of, if there's no government oversight or connection, you don't have an entity that's spelling out some of these details around, what's the jurisdiction, who would be reported to. And I've done a little research on what other states have, and they do typically pick a governmental actor to continuously monitor and regulate the Humane Society agents' actions. And there is no uniformity across the states. They can vary across the levels of branches of government. So for instance, the courts located in the Society's jurisdiction in California and Pennsylvania are charged with this appointment and oversight. Some states rely upon administrative bodies. For instance, Connecticut, they have the Commissioner of Public Safety that does that oversight and monitoring. And then occasionally the legislature defers to local governing bodies to appoint and monitor Humane Society agents. This year, there is a bill in New Hampshire where the animal control officer was elected locally, but again, had no oversight, and complaints were being generated. And so the state rep had filed a bill to require that the select board have oversight for this particular individual. So I just wanted to share those experiences with you all, because I know you want to get this right and not have to come back to this, which is why I just put forward to the committee some language that would merely just mirror the language that you have in 351B 2I around.
Have you sent that to us?
I did.
Stacy?
I
Yeah.
did. I sent it yesterday. Yes.
Okay. And Jesse, did you have a comment that you'd like to make?
I do. A couple of comments, if I may. I would articulate two things. One, that Stacy's definitely correct in noting this accountability issue for the investigators. In reality, the mechanism at play will be that if an individual goes to sign up for a training, which is administered by the Criminal Justice Training Council, the training coordinator there is going to be reaching out to the either Humane Society or municipality to confirm the connection and also to get the trainee approved, if you will. So in my case, for example, if one of my part-time weekend kennel cleaners applied for the training, I would be contacted and I would say, no, that's not an appropriate person.
I think you're froze up, or am I froze up?
No, I think Jessica is. It'll come back.
To video.
There you were froze up.
Okay. I turned off my video. It'll help. I'll keep a moment. So there's that mechanism in place. But I also want to acknowledge Stacy's concern about a lack of oversight or a place in government where this regulation can be housed, because that's been an overarching concern of the Cruelty Board for our work in the last several years. The last couple of reports that we've submitted to legislature, to I believe your committee and to the House Ag Committee, have indicated that we really recognize a vacancy in the lack of liaison between the private nonprofits and government oversight. One mechanism that is being explored currently is the Office of Professional Regulation, and how that might work to be a place to address Stacy's concern where complaints could be lodged. I know there was legislation to that effect proposed at the beginning of 2020, but it did not survive the competition of COVID legislation and concerns. So just wanted to throw that out there for a little more history for the committee. But you know, I think the point is well taken about where these investigators, who's holding them accountable beyond the designating agency and or the Animal Cruelty Investigations Advisory Board. So I hope that adds a little clarity for folks.
Thank you. So Bren, you've been listening to all this, so you can be thinking about maybe how we could fix this so that it wouldn't throw it out of whack too much from what the House wanted to do, but would address the immediate concerns of Stacy and Jesse. Why don't we move to Mary and hear your comments in regards to the bill? You're muted too, Mary. Your little red button's up. You're muted, I believe. There you go.
Is there. Okay. Well, they've done a lot of work for me. I sent the committee a couple of days ago a copy of our Blue Sky report, which was the report that we did, the Animal Cruelty Investigation Board did, and submitted to the legislature at the beginning of 2020. And the things that Jessica was talking about and the things that Stacy was talking about were mentioned in that. The section that this bill is generated from was on page 4 of that report. And I give it to you for current reference. It's a pretty comprehensive report, and it covered a lot of these areas which we couldn't fit into the current legislation. The only change that I would like to propose, because other people have really covered it, is that I'd like to propose that in the definition, I'm going to read this, of Humane Society, it's section 351.5, the word agency be changed to facility, so that it would remain Humane Society, or it would read Humane Society or Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals means a private nonprofit care agency, and I would change the word agency to facility, registered and in good standing with the Vermont Secretary of State. The reason I'd like to see a facility is that many organizations in this state, some of which are registered as 501c3s, and others are not registered at all, exist, and they have different methods for caring for animals. And the ones that have no facilities have a network of people who are do foster care. And that can be good, bad, or indifferent, but there's absolutely no regulation. And I think, as I've been spoken with you in years gone by, there is no list of shelters and rescues in the state of Vermont. I think in 2019, 7 Days did a pretty interesting study of that, and they have probably the most comprehensive list of shelters and rescues in the state, but you can't get one from any other place. It doesn't exist. So anyway, because there's so many of these ghost facilities, I think it would be useful to require a physical ghost agencies. I think it'd be useful to require a physical presence in some place where animals are being taken care of, and you can understand the procedures and standards that they have. Not all criminal activities are gigantic ones. Cruelty investigations can have 1 or 2 dogs or animals, not just a large variety, but there needs to be a place for the humane officer to take them and to care for them, and to for people to know where they are, for people to retrieve lost dogs. There's a lot of different reasons why a facility would be a good thing.
But would you use both? Could you say nonprofit animal care agencies or facilities, or would you eliminate agencies altogether and put facilities?
I would eliminate agencies altogether and put facilities, because we do not have a method in this state for keeping track of shelters and rescues. There is no list, but if there's a physical address, in theory at least, you could find it.
Yep.
I mean, more than just a physical address, not an office place. There's a place on 100 Main Street in Barry, but it's an agent that takes mail, not a physical location that takes animals.
Yeah, questions, Brian, you have a question?
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Mary, it's good to see you, and Jess and Stacy. Are there currently any investigators that are tied in with an agency? In other words, would this leave people that are currently doing that work out?
The scope of people that are currently doing this work, or who are eligible to do this work, there's no list of who is doing the work. But the people that are eligible is as Jessica said, is overly broad. And in the report that I gave you, there's about a page and a half of people who are able to be animal control officers or humane officers. And it's amazing. As Jess said, it's overly broad.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking, I'll sort of turn it 180 degrees. If there is someone currently doing the work of an investigator, and they're not necessarily tied to a facility, they would be able to still do that as long as they find a facility and then get the legislative body of that municipality to approve them and then go through the training, right?
I think that it needs to work the other way around. I think the legislative body in a community needs to designate an animal control officer, and sometimes they make jokes about the animal control officer was out of the room when he was named to the position. There's no funding, very little, and no oversight at this point. But what happens sometimes is a community will contract with an agency, with a facility. They'll contract with a facility, and so if somebody is picking up a stray dog running down the interstate, they have a place to put it, but there's no list of the facilities, and it varies from space to space, or area to area. I tried at one point to get town clerks to give me a list of animal control offices and the facilities that they were contracted with, and I think all of my inquiries went into the circular file because I got no response.
Could there be more than one Humane Society employee that's so designated by the municipality's legislative body?
Just
If I may, I don't see any reason why there couldn't be, Brian, more than one approved employee, and that would actually probably be beneficial given that it's, none of us have the budgets or the staffing for a dedicated position. So I think, it's one of those wearing multiple hats. To answer your question, if I may also try to answer your earlier question a little bit, Brian, I think without having the bill in front of me, I don't know the timeline, but I believe that there is a way for people currently doing investigations to continue to do so I think it's maybe 2 years to get the training that's current and approved by the Cruelty Board, such that they're brought up to speed, if you will. But I do think they would have to be attached to a Humane Society or a municipality. But there is a mechanism to address that grandfathering, if that's your question.
Yeah, that was, and I appreciate all of your answers. Thank you very much.
Bren, well, first, are there other questions from the committee in regards to the suggestive changes? if not, we'll go switch to Bren. And when you put this together with the house, Bren, or was there any discussion in regards to the issue of using agency or facility, or is that just the way that it's been done, I guess, in the past? So that's the way it got rewritten?
I think that language came from a suggestion from the report, I believe. And that there was no conversation in the House about changing agency to facility.
Yeah. Is there any problem with members of the committee in changing that, making that change from agency to facilities?
No,
If there isn't, you could pencil that in, Bren. And getting back to the other issue, we haven't had much discussion on that. And Bren, have you been given that some thought to explain the language in those 1 I and 2 I's?
So I did, while the witnesses were testifying, I did go and take a look at the suggested language that Stacy provided to the committee. And I don't think that specific suggestion will work because it refers to the legislative body. It essentially just sort of cuts and paste that language that you see in B2 on page 2 to B1. So it would be a designated Humane Society employee who is authorized by a legislative body to perform the duties. So you would need to be, because the legislative body in B2 refers to the legislative body of a municipality. So unless you want to have the legislative body of a municipality also authorize a Humane Society employee, I think you would just need to be clear that you were talking about the legislative body of a municipality. And I don't know if that makes sense or not. I can certainly make that change, but I don't know if a legislative body from a municipality would know who to designate from a private Humane Society.
Yeah. Jesse, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I don't see any connection. I mean, I'm thinking of the 23 towns in my county, and I can't see any one of their select boards wanting or being comfortable with looking at my organizational chart and knowing which employee was the best one to assign. And I also can see both the boards of these private organizations as well as their directors having some objection to being receiving municipal direction in a way that there was no contract for or anything else. So that would be my opinion on that.
If I could just clarify, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate council looking at it as the drafter. The intent wasn't to have the municipality authorize the Humane Society employee. I was trying to mirror the language to suggest that it would be the municipality authorizing a Humane Society to take on this responsibility and having that connection, whether it be through an agreement or contract, and let the Humane Society designate which employees to perform the tasks, but at least to have a connection from the Humane Society, the organization itself, to some government body that's providing monitoring and oversight or can address if there was a complaint that the public had. So that may not be the appropriate spot to do it, but I just want to clarify what my intent was in putting the language forward.
So, Brian?
thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't mean to be, what's the old phrase, a skunk at a garden party, but doesn't that somehow imply that the legislative body would have some sort of liability attached to it if they approve? Trying to think how this could go. If you had an investigation that went south and there was serious financial issues involved or something like that, would not the fact that the legislative body gave the Humane Society the okay to do this, couldn't you follow that back up the trail and in essence hold the legislative body liable? I guess that's a question more for Bryn than anybody else.
So I think it sounds like you're talking about some sort of tort action and against an investigator.
Yeah.
And whether or not a statutory authorization for a legislative body of a municipality to appoint. I suppose it's possible. I'm trying to think of a fact pattern where that could happen. But it sounds like what Stacy said is that she wants the maybe the definition of humane society to change so that only those humane societies that are selected by the municipality would be able to designate a person to serve as a humane officer. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I'm reflecting on other states and noting that there is no uniformity or consistency in how they provide that oversight and monitoring. But there are some that in fact give the authority to the local government to do it.
So if we set this up, so the legislative body within a community has the authority to appoint or push this responsibility to a club or a humane society organization, then let the organization or the humane society appoint for training who they want to be the humane officer. I would think that it would be a stretch, but they could work in the court system. They could work their way all the way back to the community or the legislative body. But even if the legislative body appointed the humane officer, it would be a direct problem for the legislative body if something went south for them with the way that humane officer acted. So I think in the end, it wouldn't matter. I mean, it's going to end up back in the municipality's lap anyways. I think it would be further removed from the municipality if the humane association or group appointed or recommended that so-and-so could be trained, because they would be second in line instead of first in line. So I don't know. What do you think, Bren?
That makes sense to me. I do think that a separation of the municipality's authority from the Humane Society's authority does make sense if you're thinking about liability.
Other questions from the committee? So is that something you could rewrite for us, Bren, and we could look at it, the new language?
Yep, but I would just need a little bit of clarity about what it is the committee would like to see, how you would like the municipality to be involved with the Humane Society.
Well, I believe the municipality or the legislative body of a municipality would allow or would approve a humane society to act as their agent in selecting a humane officer to regulate the things within their community. Maybe I said it all wrong, but.
So I'm happy to do that. It sounds like there are some concerns from the advisory board about that structure. I see Jessica and Mary both have their hand up, maybe.
I thought they were just waving to me. Jesse?
Yeah, thank you. I do have concerns about that. Before I address them, I would want to point out that already in H 421 as it's written, a municipality can appoint their own animal control officer who is already a municipal employee and accountable to the municipality and governed by the municipality as a humane investigator. So the municipality already has the ability to censure an ACO if that ACO does something wrong in investigating, et cetera. But then to the point of somehow making a connection between the town and the Humane Society, I'm afraid what you will run into is that if I understand it correctly, it's suggesting that a government body have authority over a private organization. And I don't see the private organizations accepting that unless there's a compensation for it. And I don't see town budgets having the flexibility to compensate. I mean, I see that as a public-private contract, unless I'm really missing the ball here. But for example, like if I had 23 supervisors who were directing me or someone within my organization to be responsible for this within 23 towns, the demands that would make on my facility and my agency are huge and probably insurmountable in some ways. And I'm one of, Homeward Bound is a large humane society. There are a number of them around the state that are smaller. So I fully appreciate that. I think the question here is accountability for investigators or humane officers who are designated by a humane society. I fully appreciate that, but I don't think that the link between a town and a humane society employee is going to be one that's feasible, let alone welcome. And I hope that's clear. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's my immediate reaction to how that might play out.
So what is the problem with the language the way it is then?
Well, to me, there wasn't a problem. There isn't a problem with the language the way it is. My understanding is this conversation is ensuing because of Stacy's concern about what if there is, for lack of a better word, malfeasance on the part of an investigator belonging to a humane society. And I understand that concern, but I think that too much manipulation of the bill as it stands isn't going to necessarily fix that problem, and we'll lose other benefits of the bill as it stands. I support overall state regulation and oversight of all animal welfare organizations, my own included, but I don't think this is the bill to create that in.
Mary, you seem to want to say something.
Well, I think what Jess says is correct in view of the way that our system works. I mean, our county system works. The place where this needs to be fixed, if in my opinion, is dealing with what being in good standing with the Secretary of State's office means. And that's a different problem. And I don't think we can fix that with this bill. But at some point, we're going to need to do something about making sure that shelters and rescues in this state are regulated. It's a very different complicated problem with a lot of moving parts. But where this language says in good standing with the Secretary of State's office, it gives us a point to come back to you with another report showing how we could perhaps work out a way to have shelters and rescues meet a standard that puts them in good standing with the Secretary of State's office. And this is where we're talking about the Office of Professional Regulation, for example. I don't think we can do too much more with this bill without losing the point of it, which is to reduce the number of untrained people that are conducting investigations. And I think, I don't know, someone said the enemy of good is perfect. And I don't know that we can come up with perfect legislation that's going to touch all the bases without getting into that other can of worms.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I think Senator Polina, you had a concern or question or statement.
Yeah, comment, I guess. I think I appreciate what Jessica or Jesse said. It seems to me that the bill as written allows for someone who is from a humane society who's trained, and also from a local citizen who's trained, could be appointed by their legislative body. So in other words, as long as they're trained, they could either be an employee designated by a humane society or not employee, but a citizen of a community who's appointed by their legislative body, as long as they're trained. So I don't understand why there has to be more of a, see, that seems fine to me. I guess that's all I'm saying. I don't see a problem with that necessarily. I could be wrong, but it seems to make sense that the key thing is that they're trained. And whether they're designated by the Humane Society or designated by a municipality, they have to be trained.
Yep. Stacy?
And I agree. I'm not expressing the concern to derail the bill. I certainly understand and appreciate how much work has gone into it, but I want to be certain that I'm clear in expressing what the concern is, which I'm not confident I've done. In essence, what I'm trying to say is there are situations where you may have a humane society in and of itself that is motivated by money or other interests that could engage in certain conduct that would necessitate consequences. And as the bill is written, you're giving a humane society, so long as it's in good standing, registered with the Secretary of State, full discretion to make an independent decision around where they're going to perform these services in the state. If there's a complaint about their employee, how they're going to resolve that complaint. And all I'm saying is that there have been instances where the society itself has engaged in conduct that ideally would have had some, or has had, monitoring and oversight that resulted in a consequence, whether it's they lose their contract because of misleading information that was brought forward and charges were eventually dropped. And you're hearing others on the board acknowledge you do have animal rescue organizations who are likely 501c3s that could put forward an employee to get the training, but the organization itself may not be on the up and up, is basically what I'm saying. And so other states typically will define a jurisdiction and where the Humane Society is going to function and where its services are going to be provided by tying it either to a court in the jurisdiction, a sheriff's office, or a state Department of Public Safety, or some level of government that has some oversight in the event you have a humane society that's engaged in bad conduct. And it may be, if that makes sense to y'all.
Wouldn't they have to be in good standing at the Secretary of State's office to be able to even participate in this training program, the way the bill's written?
What does in good standing mean? That you've paid you've paid your fee and you've registered annually? I'm not clear. I guess Mary asked that same question. Like, what exactly does that?
Well, I think the groups are going to come back with more language to add maybe next year or the year after they do their study, that would advance or would add to that particular part. But we just did a bill last year where it stated that the individuals had to be in good standing at the tax department. And in that particular case, they had to, not owe any fines or penalties and be up to date on their licenses and all these things. So I think in the short run, it would mean similar things at OPR that they require. And I'm not into that area, but Senator Collmore and Senator Polina both work with the Secretary of State's office and their other committees and probably know more about what that means in the Secretary of State's office if they put a requirement in that you have to be in good standing with the Secretary of State. Brian or Anthony, have you run into that at all in your other committees?
Well, yeah, Stacy raises a good point. Sometimes being in good standing does mean simply that you paid the fee and you've registered. But we could take a look at this. I think at this point, I'm in favor of just not adding to the bill, with the exception of what Mary wanted to add to it. Changing agency to facility and then pushing the bill out. And we could take a look at this again, Stacy, I think later down the road. But I think this is an important bill to get out this year.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would just second that. I think we'd have to call in, we'd have to discuss this with the Office of Professional Regulation, which, we could do some other time. I don't think, doesn't seem to me like it has to happen now.
Yeah. Any other comments from the committee? No. So, Bren, you haven't got much for amendments to change or suggestions to change. Is that something, we're just about out of time today, but is that something you could do between now and tomorrow morning, or?
I think I could manage that, yes.
See, we have Michael coming in at 9 o'clock, but we could back Michael up a few minutes, so if you could get in at 9 tomorrow morning, we could go over that one change and possibly move the bill and then switch to Michael.
So I am available at 9. I'm happy to do that. My understanding was that the committee wanted to hear from me about the livestock grazing issue. And I could talk about that tomorrow morning if you want to adjourn for lunch now, or I could talk about it now.
Well, why don't you run that by us? We still got 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So I'll try and do it quickly.
Well, before you go, ladies, that will kind of do it on your part of this bill. So if you want to leave, feel free to leave. And if you want to check back in tomorrow morning right at 9, you're more than welcome.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, Bren, why don't we run over the grazing language?
Okay, so I'll try and go quickly. Just to interrupt me if I'm going too fast. But I just wanted the committee to understand that there is already, and I'm sure you're aware of this, in the criminal code, there is a pretty broad exemption for people who own livestock. So it's in section 351B, and it exempts livestock and poultry husbandry practices for raising, management, and use of animals from the animal cruelty subchapter. And so I interpret this as being pretty favorable to livestock farmers and other livestock owners, because it permits the Agency of Agriculture to essentially say that any practice, any agricultural practice that it deems as acceptable as legal and therefore not subject to the animal cruelty statutes. So because that exemption already exists in section 351B, it's what I have been communicating with Senator Polina about is that I'm not sure that the concerns are necessarily valid. However, I do understand that if you're reading that shelter statute on its own, it could be confusing because it looks like it's listing these standards that could be enforced in a cruelty action against a livestock owner. But the enforcement provision, and I know you guys maybe don't work with criminal statutes that frequently, but the cruelty standards that are set out in subchapter 1 and 2, which includes the shelter of animals provision, it is not enforceable except through the enforcement statute, which is in the subchapter 1. So that exemption applies to the enforcement statute. So the livestock owners cannot be prosecuted in the same way under that enforcement provision. So, but the other thing I wanted to say is that I can understand how if you're reading the shelter provision on its own, that it could be confusing. So that's why I drafted that amendment for the House Agriculture Committee that drops right into that shelter statute, a cross-reference to the exemption. And I just have to say this, as legislative counsel, we try and make it a practice not to have redundancy in the statutes and cross-reference other existing statutes, because it may seem to diminish its effect in other places if you don't cross-reference it elsewhere. But I think that it's up to the committee if you think it's important in this circumstance because of the significant confusion. I'm happy to draft that amendment and make it clear that that shelter of animals provision, that the livestock exemption also applies to the shelter of animals provision. And I can bring that tomorrow if you want in this amendment with the facility change, so you can take a look at it and decide what you want to do then.
Well, who was it? Oh, Anthony, I think was it Vermont or Maddie from Norfolk that raised that question?
Yeah, it was actually both of them who were concerned that the grazers, the grass-fed farmers would be caught in this cruelty thing, and they would not be abiding by the shelter rules. I hear what Bryn's saying. I mean, I don't disagree with what Bryn's saying. I think the question is whether we think it's worth putting in this language to make it clear. And I'm not honestly sure, to tell you the honest truth. I mean, I go back and forth on it.
But you got a cross-reference, right, Bryn? You have a cross-reference in this language, right? That's before us.
Yeah, if you're looking at that amendment that I did for the House, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, where is it?
It should be, oh dear, I'm not sure if it's on your webpage or not.
I don't think it is. I can't find it in my email anymore.
If you want, I can forward the link to the committee real quick. Is that helpful?
Yes, I think that would be good.
Sure.
I'll do that right now. And I can also, if you want, I can share my screen so you can see it.
Yeah.
Or I would say we could deal with this in the morning too. If people would rather not lose their lunch hour, we could take it up in the morning.
Yeah, why don't you send it to us, Bryn? We can look at it on our own, and then in the morning we can chat with you, because we can finish this up next week if we don't get it done tomorrow.
Okay.
Would that work?
Of course. And if you are anxious to vote it out, I can definitely draft 2 amendments for you, one that includes the exemption and one that doesn't. So then you can just vote out the one you want to. But it's up to you, obviously.
But Bree, the amendment you're talking about would be to the shelter bill or to this cruelty bill?
You could add it to this bill. You could include, you could just drop in the shelter of animals section. I think it's relevant.
Okay.
So you could.
That might make more sense.
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Bryn. We should have you pretty well confused by now. And
me? No,
yeah,
I'm not confused.
Well, thanks for being with us, and if you want to be with us, say right at 9, or, you know, we can at least get the other amendment done, and send us the one on the shelter. stuff.
Okay, will
Yeah.
do.
Thanks,
Anything else?